Here is a question most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Not because it frightens them. Because they are too busy. Because it feels abstract. Because there will be time for it later. What makes a life meaningful? Not successful, not comfortable. Not admired, meaningful. And here is why that question cannot wait. The research on this is not soft or philosophical speculation. It comes from decades of longitudinal science. These studies have tracked real people across entire lifetimes, their choices, relationships, work, and health. Researchers then looked backward from the end to see what actually mattered. The Harvard study of adult development is the longest-running study of adult life ever conducted. It began in 1938 and has followed the same group for over 80 years. The study tracks their physical health, mental health, relationships, careers, and satisfaction with their lives. The finding that emerges most consistently, across 8 decades of data, is not about wealth, or achievement, or intelligence, or even physical health. It is about the quality of a person's relationships and their sense that their life has meaning. The people who reported, at the end of their lives, that their lives had mattered, that they had been part of something important, that their presence had made a difference to people they cared about, were measurably healthier, measurably happier, and on average, measurably longer lived than those who could not make that report. Meaning is not a luxury, it is a biological variable. But before we go further, I need to dismantle something. Because the most widely circulated advice about meaning, the advice that has shaped an entire generation's approach to careers, relationships, and identity, is not just wrong. It is measurably, demonstrably counterproductive. The advice is, follow your passion. The idea is that somewhere inside you, there is a pre-existing passion waiting to be discovered. That's your job to find it, and that once you do, work will feel like meaning, and meaning will feel like happiness, and everything will resolve. The research on this is consistent and damning. Psychologist Paul O'Keefe at Yale ran studies where participants were primed with either a fixed theory of interests, the idea that passions are found, or a growth theory, the idea that passions are developed. The fixed theory group was less likely to explore topics outside their existing interests, more likely to give up when those interests became difficult, and reported less satisfaction when their supposed passion presented real challenges. Cal Newport spent years documenting why follow your passion fails as career advice, summarizing the research conclusion simply: passion follows mastery, not the reverse. The people who describe their work as a calling are not people who found their calling first and then got good at it. They are people who got so good at something that their relationship with it transformed into meaning. The direction matters, and most people have it backwards. So if meaning is not found, what is it? And where does it actually come from? This is where the science gets genuinely fascinating. Because the researchers who have studied this most carefully have converged on a framework that is both more complex and more actionable than anything the self-help genre has produced. Martin Seligman, who founded the field of positive psychology, proposed the PERMA model as a framework for human flourishing, 5 elements that contribute independently to a life that feels worth living. Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. But it is the specific element of meaning, what distinguishes it from pleasure, from engagement, from happiness in the ordinary sense, that deserves the closest examination. Because meaning is not the same as feeling good. And this distinction is not semantic. It is the central insight the research keeps returning to. In the 1980s, psychologist Roy Baumeister and his colleagues began studying the difference between happiness and meaning in systematic detail. What they found overturned something most people take entirely for granted. Happiness, in the hedonic sense, feeling good, experiencing pleasure, the absence of discomfort, is primarily about the present moment. It is reactive. It responds to what is happening to you right now. Meaning operates differently. It is constructed across time. It integrates past, present, and future into a coherent narrative in which your life is going somewhere, your choices are part of something, and your existence has consequences that extend beyond your own experience. The implications of this are remarkable. Because they mean that some of the experiences most strongly associated with a meaningful life are not pleasant. Raising children is consistently rated as one of the most meaningful human experiences and one of the most reliable reducers of moment-to-moment happiness. Caring for a sick parent is exhausting and painful and deeply, structurally meaningful. Pursuing a creative or intellectual project that matters to you is frequently frustrating, frequently uncomfortable, and among the most reliable sources of the sense that your life is being well spent. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz and 3 other concentration camps and emerged to write one of the most important psychological texts of the 20th century, documented something similar from the most extreme possible vantage point. He observed that the prisoners most likely to survive psychologically were not those who experienced the least suffering. They were those who could construct a framework in which the suffering had meaning. A reason for it, a person is waiting. A purpose to return to, a book still unwritten. Frankl's core observation was that humans can endure almost any suffering if they can find meaning in it. That meaning gives direction and resilience, the capacity to navigate extreme challenges without being destroyed by them. This is not an abstraction. It is a clinical finding with direct daily relevance. Now let's get specific about the structure of meaning. Because the research identifies not just its presence or absence but the specific components from which it is built. And these components are actionable in ways that the vague instruction to find your purpose is not. The first component is coherence, the sense that your life makes sense. That it follows a comprehensible narrative. That the events, choices, and outcomes of your existence, however difficult some of them have been, form a story with internal logic. Coherence does not require that your life has been easy. It requires that it be interpretable. The research consistently shows that people who can tell a story about their past, including its hardships, in which they are an agent rather than simply a victim, report dramatically higher levels of meaning and psychological well-being than those who cannot. The story itself is not the life, but it is the scaffolding through which meaning becomes accessible. This is why reflective practices, journaling, therapy, structured conversation about your own history, are not merely therapeutic in the sense of addressing pathology. They are generative. They build the coherence architecture through which meaning becomes available. The second component is purpose, the sense that your life is directed towards something. That your actions today are in service of a goal or a value that extends into the future. Purpose does not need to be grand. The research is explicit on this. The retiree who has organized her days around being present for her grandchildren reports the same structural quality of purposeful engagement as the scientist who has organized his career around solving a specific problem. The scale of the purpose is less important than the genuine alignment between daily action and something that matters to you. What the research does show is that purpose needs to be other-directed in some meaningful sense. The goals most reliably associated with sustained meaning are not purely self-referential. They involve contribution. They have someone or something outside the self as their intended beneficiary. This is one of the most consistent findings in the entire literature. The most reliable path from purposelessness to meaning runs through contribution, not through achievement. The third component is what Csikszentmihalyi documented in decades of research on the psychology of optimal experience, the state he called flow. Deep, effortless involvement in a challenging, purposeful activity, a feeling of intensity that leads to a sense of ecstasy and clarity in which the task calls upon a particular skill and is possible while being just difficult enough. Flow is not a bonus. It is structural to meaning. It is the experiential signature of fully engaged, fully present, skillfully challenged effort. And it is available not just in extraordinary moments but in the ordinary texture of daily work and creative life, if the conditions are right. The conditions are specific. The challenge must be real but within reach. The feedback must be clear. The goal must be intrinsically valued, not just instrumentally pursued. And there must be sufficient skill to engage seriously with the difficulty, which is why flow and mastery are deeply linked, and why the investment in genuine competence is never merely a professional calculation. It is a meaning-building one. The fourth component is mattering, the sense that your existence makes a difference to someone or something outside yourself. This is where the research on meaning and the research on relationships converge most clearly. Not as a coincidence, but because they are describing the same underlying human need from different angles. The people who report the highest levels of meaning are not, on average, those with the most achievement, the most wealth, the most recognition, or the most influence. They are those with the clearest evidence that they have mattered, in the concrete, relational sense, to specific people in their specific lives. Not to the world, to someone. And that someone knew it. This is a finding with immediate practical implications. The pursuit of meaning through scale, reaching more people, accumulating more impact, becoming more known, can paradoxically undermine the mattering that meaning actually requires. The parent who was present, the teacher who saw something in a struggling student that the student didn't see in themselves, the friend who stayed, these are the lives that the research on meaning, examined carefully, consistently describes as having been well spent. Now here is the most counterintuitive and practically important finding in the entire field. Meaning is not discovered. It is not a pre-existing fact about your life waiting to be recognized. It is constructed, actively, deliberately, continuously. Psychologist Michael Steger, who has spent his career measuring meaning across thousands of people, draws an explicit distinction between the presence of meaning, the sense that your life currently has purpose and significance, and the search for meaning, the active pursuit of it. And what his data shows is striking. The people who score highest on the presence of meaning are not primarily people who searched intensively for it. They are people who build it through committed relationships, through meaningful work, through contribution, through the reflective practice of making sense of their own history. The search for meaning, pursued as a primary activity, tends to correlate with lower well-being, not higher. Not because the question is wrong, but because meaning is not located in the searching. It is located in the living, specifically, in the quality of engagement with the things that matter, pursued with sufficient commitment to allow depth to develop. This reframes the entire project. The question is not, what is my purpose? The question is, what am I building? What am I becoming? What does my presence make possible for the people around me? What will have been true about this year, when I look back from 10 years forward? These questions are not abstract. They are design questions, and answering them with genuine care is the practical work of building a meaningful life. Let me bring this to the ground level, where it actually changes something. There is a thought experiment I want you to run. Not as an exercise in existential anxiety, as a design tool. Imagine that you are at the end of your life. Not in a morbid sense, in a clarifying one. You have a full perspective. You can see the whole arc, the choices that mattered and the ones that felt urgent but didn't. The relationships that turned out to be the substance of everything and the ambitions that felt central but proved peripheral. From that vantage point, looking back at the version of you that exists today, what would you want that person to be spending their time on? What would you want them to know about what actually mattered? What would you wish they had started sooner or stopped pretending didn't matter? This is not a question about regret. It is a question about clarity. And the research on end-of-life reflections, documented most systematically by palliative care workers and psychologists who study what people say when they know the story is nearly complete, converges on a small set of answers that are remarkably consistent across cultures, across economic circumstances, across vastly different kinds of lives. Almost nobody wishes they had worked more. Almost everybody wishes they had been more present in their closest relationships. Almost everyone identifies a version of themselves that they wish they had expressed more completely, more honest, more creative, more themselves. And almost everyone describes the moments that feel most precious not as the moments of greatest achievement but as the moments of genuine connection and full presence with another person. The architecture of meaning does not require extraordinary circumstances. It requires ordinary days spent with genuine intention. The science of meaning is not an instruction manual. It cannot tell you what your specific life should be directed toward. That is irreducibly yours to determine. What it can tell you, and what the evidence, accumulated across decades and thousands of lives, makes clear, is this. Meaning is built through coherence, the practice of making sense of your own story, including its hardships, in a way that preserves your agency and identity as its author. It is built through purpose, the commitment to something outside yourself that your daily actions genuinely serve. It is built through engagement, the investment in craft and mastery that makes flow available, the state where you are most fully yourself, most fully alive, most fully present to what you are doing. It is built through mattering, the quality of presence you bring to the specific people whose lives intersect with yours, and the evidence you leave in those lives that you were here. None of this requires a revelation. None of it requires finding the right answer before you can begin. It requires showing up, with intention, to the life that is already yours. Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in conditions that extinguished everything else, expressed it with the precision that only extreme experience can produce. Meaning is not something you find. It is something you choose to create, a response to existence rather than a feature of it, available in any circumstances to anyone willing to claim it. That is not a small thing to know. That may be the most important thing.